Morning.
Yes.
It's lovely to be here. It's nice and fresh for me because it's 5 a.m. in the morning and we're just a day past the full moon. So I've been outside in the dark and checked the moon, which is beaming into me from behind some clouds. It's gorgeous.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and yeah, I guess it's a nice time of day. I love it. And I'm really happy to be here and share whatever thoughts come along. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. It's it is 1 p. It's like 1 p.m. here afternoon. So the sun is starting to make its decline, descend
That's
from
because it's appearing here. It's going to come up.
exactly right. Yeah. And so it's been an interesting day. Of course, there's a lot going on, and our conversation feels so timely in my own world of trying to imagine beyond some of the madness that we're seeing,
Yeah.
and from a place that is hopeful, and from a place that is inspired, and from a place that is,
Yeah.
not waiting, but is already here, and available. And so I'm so excited to be talking to you today. And I think maybe a place to start is to maybe even speak about how you, when it comes to being involved in this work, because we're going to be talking about the role of Indigenous wisdom, indigeneity in general, related to systems change and societal change. And so it would be good, I think, for people to know how you arrive in this work in general, like how do you arrive in this work in general?
So, do you mean my journey into this work? Okay.
Yeah.
So, I guess for me, growing up, I grew up in a mixture of the Western world and an Indigenous world. My father is from the UK. My mother is from here in Aotearoa. And we grew up in tribal settings, in part. So that was our weekends. That was our way when people passed away. Whenever anything went wrong in the house, a child got sick. The Indigenous ways were the things that our family turned to. On the daily, we got on the bus, we went to school, we lived in the Western world. And because we were rural, we didn't really get to go to other people's homes other than those that we did in the weekend and things like that. So I just thought everybody was like us. I didn't know that other people's homes were different. They didn't have people passing through all the time. They didn't call in outsiders to help with, one or other ailment of a child. They all went to the doctor. They all went to the supermarket. We dug our garden.
Yeah.
I didn't know that the world was different. And in the weekends, for whatever reason, we would always gather at our local meeting place, either for the grown-ups to have meetings or for us to take care of anybody who had passed away. All of those things. But as a kid, it was the life of Riley. So long as you stayed out of the way of the adults, you were sweet. You could play all day long, think you're getting away with murder, but actually there was always someone watching. The minute you go to do something wrong, there's somebody going, I wouldn't do that if I were you. So you just learned how to behave and stay under the radar, which I thought was a beautiful childhood, and I feel very lucky for that. My father was very, very committed to making sure that all his children had a good education. And when I say a good education, it was through the public system. It wasn't anything special, but he expected us to go to school every day. He expected us to be respectful at school. He expected us to do well in our studies. So we had those two contrasts. Our mother was really nurturing. Our father was very, I guess he was strict to English, but he was also very committed to making sure that his kids had the best possible opportunities in life. We weren't wealthy at all, but I didn't have anything to compare that with. So I didn't know what wealthy and not wealthy was. It was just, So anyway, did reasonably well at school, was a bit naughty, but I guess that's what happens when you get to an age where you want to test the boundaries. Managed to have a really good career in IT and do some awesome work in that space in and around the Pacific. But one day, I was truly blessed in that job. We had our own team, and we were the pick of the bunch, the creme de la creme, and we got all the best projects, and we always had adequate budget. It was great. But one day I just woke up and thought to myself, money's not enough.
Yeah.
You get new projects, you're still with the same great team, but it's the same thing every day, just a different company, slightly different deliverables, but it was the same all the time. So from there, I decided that actually it's time. My children were just finishing college. So it was time to start to really think about what I wanted to do once they'd left home. I ended up looking after my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law got really unwell and didn't want to die in hospital. So she asked if she could come home to our house for her final days, which was an absolute privilege. My mother-in-law and I didn't get on very well at all. I was surprised she wanted to come to our house. But I learned so much from caring for her. So I stepped out of that really busy role and stayed home to care for her. She wasn't expected to last more than a week. She lasted 6 months. So her and I had 6 months of getting used to and getting to know each other, despite the fact that I'd already been married to her son for 30 years. But we really got to know each other, and I got to see the amazing woman that there was. When she passed, I needed to take some time because I was her sole carer 24/7. So I needed to take some time for myself to rest. So I went and I used that time to learn about things that naturally interested me, like Indigenous healing. And so I was really fortunate that I could go and learn from different cultures around the world, use up all my ear points, because, when you're working flat out, you accrue ear points like hell, but you have no time to spend them. So it was really good. It was really good to use those and travel and watch and learn from other people, work alongside them. And then I decided that, it's a bit flaky. This Indigenous healing's a bit flaky. How do they know all this stuff? So I went and studied health science for 3 years. And then I decided, my goodness, that doesn't have all the answers either. Now what am I going to do? So I just went back to my own culture and went, I can take all that stuff that I learned from the scientific world, and I can use that to help understand some of the things our traditions do. And so I really got heavily involved in our traditional medicine here in Aotearoa, which is, Aotearoa, New Zealand, for those that don't know that. So I got heavily involved in doing that, which was wonderful. But I guess in our world, you just step into the roles that you can do. It's you don't actually get much of a choice. I've noticed that with our old people. You're good at this, go and do it. That was kind of the conversation. It wasn't, I'd like to do this. That's not on the radar. So from my past life working in that world, in that very, very busy capitalistic world, I had accrued some really good skills in terms of contract management, in terms of negotiation, in terms of working with people who, or communicating with people when you speak different languages. We might both speak English, but when you come from different paradigms, we can all use English and still not understand each other. Yes. So I naturally ended up gravitating towards the advocating space for our traditional practices. there's a whole lot of stuff goes on with governments and politics and even our own tribal politics. So there was a lot of work to be done in that space and help building bridges between different ways of knowing and understanding. So somehow I naturally gravitated towards that, but I managed to hold on to actually practicing as well. I've always thought the last type of accountant I want is the accountant who's never been in business. They might be great accountants, but if they don't understand the reality of applying all those rules in business, then actually you're not the accountant for me. And I didn't want to be that person in healing. I didn't want to step out of healing and solely focus on advocating, because that would take me out of touch with the reality of the people that I was serving. So over the years, I've managed to spend quite a bit of time in the space of training and making sure that all of those people that invested knowledge in me, our traditional knowledge in me and others, isn't wasted, and that it doesn't stop with me when I go. So I have a responsibility to make sure that that knowledge lives on in others. So I spend about a third of my time ensuring that I pass on what I know to other people that are in this space, and constantly learning myself, because one of the first lessons I learned is that if you want to accelerate your learning, then start teaching. And that's proved to be so true. Just share the little bit that you do know and share it well, and you'll be amazed at how much you learn. And that has been true for my journey. So I love teaching. I love sharing. The other thing that I do is I stay in practice so that, I'm aware of the changing challenges that our people face every day, and help to be part of the solution in those things. It's great to talk from theory. It's great to talk from 30 years ago. But unless you know the reality for the people that you're here to serve, you're not so good at it. And then the last third of my time, I'm still very much in the advocating space, advocating for the rights of our Indigenous, advocating for the rights of people to have choice in the medical/healing space. And while that's, I would have to say, probably sometimes my least pleasant part of what I do, it's also really rich. Like, I meet people that I wouldn't ordinarily call friend in those spaces, who have become friend. And just remembering that we're people first. We're not our jobs. We're not our individual aspirations. We're people. And there's so many things that are alike that we share, so many more things. And when I work in those spaces, I'm reminded of that constantly. And so I learn all the time. I think one of my teachers said, the day you stop learning, Donna, is the day you start to grow old. So, and I'm very committed to learning whatever I can, anything that strikes my interest. I love to learn. I love to get to the bottom of a good mystery, all of those kind of things. So that was a very long-winded version, I think. Sorry, Eddie, about how we got here.
Oh, please never apologize. That was filled with beautiful gems. And I think also, I mean, we have the framework of our conversation has been, I think, rooted in the role of Indigenous wisdom and in the change that we're in the transformation that we're constantly about. And I think that there's some interesting things that come out of listening to your story that'll be interesting just to kind of reflect on a bit, because one of the things that's standing out for us is this idea of changing our systems. And when we say systems, we're really meaning the way we do life together, the way we collaborate, the way we integrate with each other, how we care for each other. Those things are the systems that we operate within. At the core of a lot of those are ideological basis, that shape the logic of what accounting is, the logic of what government is, community, all those different things. And I think it's so powerful that you have an experience that sometimes because of circumstance, like in your childhood, where you happen to be in a blended experience, but then also by choice of diving into Indigenous healing and then going to seek more like things that you might not not
Yeah.
identified as Indigenous wisdom, to then integrate it still into practice. And it makes me think to ask, or just kind of get your perspective on, what do you how you might describe the impact or the role of, because like for instance the question of what does the and what do Indigenous eyes see in thinking about systems change, or thinking about how to go about caring for the healing that people need, that is, or and maybe not even just Indigenous, just your unique perspective given the range of wisdom or knowledge that you've been able to kind of gain for yourself. I know that's a wordy question, but I'm curious. I hope it made sense enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. It does. And I think it gets to the heart of what attracted me back into this space.
Mm,
Is for me, it's the potential of people. That's
mm,
what pulls me back into this. Um, Here in Aotearoa, we refer to our healing practices as rongoa. Now, rongo is, for me, that translates to being of the senses. And so over time, I think that we've become disconnected. We've become disconnected from our ways of knowing and understanding the world. And we take very much an academic, scientific approach in most of our daily lives. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That's real. It's helped humankind progress. There's a lot less, well, medically, there's a lot less suffering in the world. And so we've got a lot to be grateful for in terms of science. And we've had to rely on that as we've become disconnected from our Indigenous ways of knowing. And I think the important thing is that we remember that everybody is Indigenous to somewhere, that our histories date back to people who first walked the land in whatever part of the planet that is. And by being the first to walk that land, you relied heavily on your senses. Our senses were well attuned. And there are things that our ancestors knew and understood that just look crazy to us, aka woo-woo. You know, we look at them, we go, I don't know where that came from, or really, maybe I'll just pretend I don't know that part. But what I've discovered is, my ancestors knew things that don't make sense to me. And I know this because of the language that we have. And the interesting thing is that our original languages all relate very closely to the land that they first walked on. So when my ancestors arrived here in Aotearoa, they had to name every tree. They had to name every bird, every river, every mountain, every bend in every mountain, every type of wind, rain. We had 200-300 names for wind here, and each wind brought with it more knowledge in terms of where it came from, where it was going to, how it responded on the land, the impact that it had, all of those things. So we were heavily connected to the environment that was around us. And with that came knowledge that we can't even begin to imagine now. We've become so disconnected. We don't like the wind in our face, the rain on our hair, the mud between our toes. We refer to the tiniest insects as creepy crawlies. We've become quite disconnected. And in doing so, our ability to understand things beyond science is constrained. And I often think that the things that our ancestors knew that we might look at and go, wow, that superstition's amazing. But it's still superstition in our modern day minds. But I know that my ancestors knew stuff that I just don't know how they knew. We knew, the royal we, my ancestors, knew that Saturn had rings around her. the planet Saturn. We know that from the name that they gave to that planet, which refers to the rings. Pariaro was the name that we gave to Saturn, referring to the rings that surround it. Now, that was long before NASA. That was long before telescopes and things like that. How did they know that? And then we had Jupiter, which some of our people also referred to as Pariaro. Now, NASA didn't know that Jupiter had rings around it until the 1990s, but our people knew well before. So how did they know this? How did they know these things? How did the people know how to place the rocks at Stonehenge so precisely without all the amazing technology that we have today? How did we build the pyramids? Now I'm Egyptian. No, I'm not. But how did humankind build those pyramids the way they did? And I know these are all mysteries in the world, but I think as we start reconnecting to nature, those things that we think are magic or miracles or unexplained, they're not unreal. We can see Stonehenge, we can see the pyramids, we know now that Saturn, through science, that Saturn has rings around it. It's a case, I think, of when you are so innately connected to your environment, which is extremely important to survival, and we are learning that now, we are relearning that now with, the changes in climate. We are learning that now in terms of how some of our systems that we've relied upon in our lifetime are starting to implode, and we're starting to have to reach back. But when we look at some of these things our elders knew, they might have presented as magic. They might have presented as miracles. How did people put their hands on people and heal them? How does that work in a modern day logic? These things seem like miracles. And so in my mind, I know that they're real. They're not something we wish. They're not something that we imagine. They're real. And so I think of miracles simply as things that science is yet to discover. Us being able to talk across the world now, even 50 years ago, would have been considered a miracle. How can you talk to somebody on the other side of the world, let alone see them? Now we take that for granted. So I think that miracles are just things that science is yet to discover, and our ability to work that way. I think of healers that we have here in Aotearoa who can, this may sound a bit odd, but who get a sense of different smells when they're around people. Then it's not a physical smell that people exude, but is something that our senses can detect. And those different smells tell us what's going on in the human body. Now, that might seem a bit odd to some of us today, but if we've got animals, dogs, that are detecting disease in people through their sense of smell, then it's possible that our smell was attuned as well many, many moons ago, and that we could do that. And some people have been in those circles all their life. I'm not one of them, but some people have been in those circles all their life. And so that sense is highly attuned. How we describe that, how we share that needs a little bit of change, though, because you can't just walk past and go, "Oh, Eddie, I detect a bit of diabetes. How are you?" So we have to be very careful at how we might communicate these days, those things. But we still do have people like that. And for us, the word rongo, or rongoa, our training, our healing practice, is really of the senses. But the senses beyond what we see. So sight in itself is its own sense. But when we talk about rongo, we talk about all the other senses that we use for detection. Um, so for me, working in those spaces, working in those Indigenous spaces is very much about connection, not just to each other, but back to the landscape. When we learn things, and I say these things often, but they're probably the best way I have for articulating how much richer we are when we are connected to our ecosystems, to our planet, is, here in Aotearoa, we've managed to very cleverly destroy 90% of our wetlands. So, the country is living off 10% less, actually. I think it's about 7%. 7% of what this land needs in order to be well, because the wetlands have a specific job. Our wetlands, no matter where they are in the world, their job is to filter the water before it goes back to the ocean, so that it doesn't go into the ocean dirty, and that it doesn't smother the life in the ocean that we rely upon in order to be well. So wetlands have a very, very important function in the world. And if you destroy 90% of them, then you've got a real problem. And it becomes a problem for the world, not just our little wee couple of rocks in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, but we then start seeding that problem in the rest of the world, as does many of our other heavily inhabited land masses. But when we learn to look with Indigenous eyes, we start to understand the function of wetlands and why we need to do it. And then when we look at the human body, we understand, or the human existence, we understand that we are a microcosm of the world. And so how the world functions, how the land, the sea, the heavens function, is a replica of how, or we are a replica of how they function. So when we look at the wetlands and then we look at our human body, it's not hard to see that the wetlands perform the same function for the land as our kidneys perform for our body. So when we turn to an Indigenous way of looking, and we know how to heal a wetlands, how to restore the wetlands, our swamps, things like that, that is the same formula we need to apply to caring for our kidneys. They do the same function. So when you can heal the land, you can heal the people. When we start to get into those ways, those Indigenous ways of knowing and understanding the world, then we have another choice in terms of how we approach remediating some of the mess we've created and ensure the ability for all things to thrive together. When we understand we're part of a bigger world, nothing exists in isolation, therefore nothing can heal in isolation. You can't just take a pill and be healed if you haven't fixed the reason you became unwell in the first place. You're just going to have to take another pill to fix the pill that you just took, and you still haven't fixed the problem. So it's very much about our connection to the world that determines our health and well-being. And sometimes I have to wonder how we as a species have survived so long, because we do some really dumb things. Nobody else messes up their nest like humans do. It's just, it seems really crazy, but when we put our Indigenous hats back on, we realize how important it is for our survival that everything else survives. All of those things were here before us. Our life, our existence is dependent on them. And yet somehow we think that they're dependent on us. It's the other way round, and we were the last of the species to be created by many Indigenous ways of knowing and understanding the world. So therefore, everything that came before us is important to our existence. And so we need to care for those things. And, one of my teachers says often, we are, as a species, we are all entitled to enough in order that we be well. No more, no less. To take more is to steal from our siblings in the natural world. And so there is enough. And that's all about perception. We are all entitled to enough in order that we be well. No more, no less. And when we live in existence with that at the forefront of our mind, then I believe that we are richer. And we have so much more choice. Our children have so much more choice. And our job is to ensure that the world continues to exist in a way that enables our children and our grandchildren to thrive. When I get to my age, I'm collateral damage. I'm just there to make sure that I do what I can do so that my progeny have a life that is rewarding and enables them to thrive and to help their brothers and sisters in the natural world to all live together in connected. Nature has the perfect balance and strives to create that. The world will go on with or without us, and we can choose to be here or not. And for me, making sure that my grandchildren have the skills they need and understand the connectedness of everything so that they can find joy in their lives, to be able to contribute to the lives of others, to know that they belong. We all, as a child of nature, human beings belong on this planet. We have a rightful place. It's only when we overstep the mark and think we own everything, we can take everything, that things get out of balance and we become unwell. And when you hone that right back to us as individuals, the rules are the same in our communities. Don't think about the whole world, just think about your community. We need diversity. We need diversity of thought, diversity of skills, diversity of how we interact with each other. And yet I see humans, we're trying to iron out all the differences. We're almost making clones of ourselves. And the world is poorer for that. Learning things from other cultures that we've lost in our culture here in Aotearoa is really valuable to us. Being able to walk alongside other cultures and the things and the values that they've managed to retain are different to the things that we as Māori here in Aotearoa have managed to retain. And I can learn a lot from other cultures and the things that they've maintained and share what we have, and we're all richer for it. We spend more time in looking after how we clean the waters of the world, than we do in preventing them from becoming messy, because we don't want to change our lifestyle. We don't want to change what we think makes us comfortable. And if you think of the land and the swamps and the role that they perform as kidneys, I liken it to, we spend more on dialysis than we do on protecting our kidneys. You know, sometimes I look back at myself as a part of a species and go, are we for real? You know, and my ancestors are up there looking down going, my goodness, is this what we left behind? These people are not going to survive.
Yeah.
They need to shape up really quickly.
Yeah.
Or they're just going to disappear. Yeah. So, yeah, Indigenous ways, to get back to your question, I really, really am intrigued, am in awe of the things that our ancestors knew and understood that we are having to relearn. And I truly believe that as a species, the more we can call forward the ways of knowing of our ancestors by slowing down, by just being in this world, by just experiencing our senses, life will be better for everybody. And so to me, Indigenous ways of knowing, doing, being, and thinking, look, no one way has all the answers, but we are definitely poorer if we leave those things behind. And we see it every day.
We definitely do. And every time I love talking to you because gems just flow from you like a fountain, and I love it. And I think there's something also there's a couple things I think that rise up out of even our conversation and the intention behind it, which I think, one, you provide of understanding, I think, of Indigenous ways and Indigenous wisdom that I think is more grounding for people than I think some of the ways that we might conceptualize it. Like I think some may believe that indigeneity has to do with the fact that it is from the past, not that it is of relationship, not that it is something that is a living experience. It's not a time bound thing. And also that is that in relationship to even how we understand each other. That process that you listed or described of being in relationship with the land meant naming the land, meant understanding the purpose of the land and that the role that you play within it and all those different things. I think there's something interesting to explore about the fact that what does it mean to have what sustains a society be based on other factors than understanding your relationship to the land. You need to understand your relationship to accounting spreadsheets, your relationship to banks, your relationship to institutions that may have zero regard for the tangible things that make living accessible. And I think that, to your point, those myths that are at the core of that understanding of society can be deeply hard to separate from. And I think that you even mentioned earlier about the not necessarily having a lot of choice in one way of society because you're good at this thing, go do this thing, right? But we're experiencing but that in a certain social context probably didn't have the same impact on society that the lack of choice today in terms of being with your senses and being of the senses and in that practice, the ability to access that choice today is behind a lot of cooperation with systems that function in direct opposition sometimes of that actual practice, and I think that you started to list some ideas about how people can connect, and it makes me bring all that to a question, which is another perception I think people sometimes have about Indigenous practice and wisdom is that it's something for certain people. It's certain for certain areas of the world that if you don't come from that experience, that it may not be something that you can connect to, or that because it is woo-woo or because of those things, that it's not something that can be brought into your professional life or into what people may consider modern society. They consider those things separate. And I think I'm interested to know your thoughts on how do people bring this wisdom into their practical understanding of day-to-day life. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
So I think the first thing that we need to do is to remember that we are the living faces of our ancestors. We are them, they are us. And everything they knew, we know. It's in our bones, it's in our DNA. It's not lost. So how do we access that? And it doesn't matter where in the world you're from. For me, I'm lucky. I live on the land that I was born on. So a good 50% of what I know comes from this land. When we know that, then we're halfway there. Mm. If there's people living on this land that weren't born on this land, but they can access through the Indigenous people of this land and our way of knowing, they can use that to access what's in their DNA. And when I go there, I can learn from them how they connect to their land in order to understand who I am. Now, many of us find it difficult to connect to that. And I'm not free of that. We live lives that are full and rushed and from one thing to the other thing. I remember when I was raising children that, I'd work really hard all week, get everything sorted, so that on Saturday morning we could wake up and say to the children, what shall we do this weekend? We're all home together. What shall we do? What adventure shall we have?
Mm.
I don't see that in my grandchildren. Their weekends are planned months in advance. Everybody is rushing from one thing to the next thing. It's not a criticism. It's just a way of observing how in a very short time, the way we are in the world has changed. Now, unless we are still, unless we slow down, we cannot hear the voices of our ancestors guiding us. And I was thinking the other day, why is it that when I attend something online, where I have a passive role, when I attend something online, it's not the same as reading a book. The information just doesn't go in the same. Because truth be known, I'm listening to Eddie talk because it's a very good conversation. It's something I'm deeply interested in while I do my email, while I look outside and think, gee, I must get my washing in. And all of these other things that are spinning in my mind while I'm online. And I've not been a great reader over my lifetime. In fact, I've never read a novel in my life. I only read for information, you see. I'm focused on outcomes. But the one thing I do have noticed that by picking up a book, I have to stay focused on that task. The whole idea of being still and centered and have a physical book in my hand means that the knowledge that I read or start to accumulate as a result of reading sticks much better than when I'm online and can do 10 things at once. And nobody can see me doing my email while I'm talking. So I think it's really important that we slow down so that we can hear the voices of our ancestors guiding us. We look a bit crazy in a modern world when, I can remember sitting in a meeting with some people. We've been charged with this responsibility for, it doesn't really matter what we've been charged with, but anyway, we're sitting there, we're trying to problem solve. And there's this thing that's really got us going. And the people in this group are amazing people. There's some of our leaders in this space. And we're going round and round in circles saying, what we've been doing is not working. We need something else. We need something else. And I can hear us really clearly, and the frustration and all of that. So in my mind, I detach from the group. And I sit there and I just quietly, some people might call it praying. I don't call it praying, but some people might call it praying or meditating or whatever. But I just quietly sit there and I think, what would my ancestors have done? How would they have solved this? And this is the thought process, as weird as it is. This is my thought process. I'm talking to my grandfather, who has now passed on. And I'm saying to him, what would you do? And he's going, I can feel him coming back to me saying, tell me the problem. What is the problem? It's like, well, everything we're doing is not working. And I can hear him saying to me, as a people, We were very skilled at strategy. Rommel said, "Give me a platoon of Māori and I will win the war." Strategically, we are some of the best thinkers on the planet. That's not to say we're better than anybody else, but in certain circumstances, we overcame the British when they came here with all their technology. We were outnumbered in warfare, and yet we still managed to get our women and our children out, because that's our priority. To keep our race alive is to protect our women and our children so that our race can persist. And so that was our priority in warfare, was to keep our women and children safe, to get them out of harm's way. And we managed to do that. So my grandfather would be saying to me, "You know strategy. You understand strategy. What is your problem? Look deeper into how those even before me came to overcome the impossible." And I looked at our warfare strategy, what I know of it, and there are like 3 rules. One of them is to gather your friends close. So go out there and find all your allies in the world that you're operating in. Find out who your allies are. Bring them close. Then pretend to be bigger than you are. So perch these allies in different strategic places. And when they speak, make it sound like there's 100 of them speaking. Not just that one in that corner, not just that one there. And then the third thing was, and always make sure that you have an exit strategy so that you can fight again one day. And so when this imaginary, or whatever you like to call it, conversation with my grandfather became apparent, I shared it with the group. And I said, "This is what my grandfather says. This is the way to solve the problem. Let's gather our friends close. Let's do a PR campaign," because that's the modern word for it. Let's do a PR campaign that makes us appear bigger than we are. And let's make sure that we don't back ourselves into a corner, and that we always have an exit strategy, because things are not won on one battle. So make sure you have an exit strategy. Make sure you can maintain your face and what we call our mana, our dignity, in exiting, just so we can come back again. And that really cleared our minds for how we were going to address this problem that we had been struggling with. So there's real value in going back to our elders, who, I think if I had told him the problem, it was some stuff about international agreements, he wouldn't have had an idea what I was talking about. So you have to really break down what the problem is. You have to break it right down to real simple terms so that they can go back and look, if strategy is your problem, you know what to do. Here it is. Just watch your ancestors and you know how to do it. So being able to connect to that logic today in order to help solve the problems of today, I think is huge. I mean, and the more we rely on AI, the less we're going to do that, which is, you know, we need to keep these skills alive. We don't keep these skills alive. When somebody takes away a tool that you've used forever, then you're a bit like a possum in headlights. You don't know which way to go. You're stunned. And in the meantime, that can create some real problems. So it's important that we keep these tools, these ways of knowing alive. Now, I also think one of the skills that we need to bring back to the front is our ways of knowing. We're very head focused, and we're very much in the thinking space rather than the knowing space. And there are things that we all know that we know we've never been taught. Sometimes very clever, very articulate things come out of our mouths, and somebody goes, "What did you say?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What did I say?" I mean, I heard myself, but if you're going to ask me to re-articulate verbatim, I don't think I could. kind of got the essence of what I was conveying, but I don't know that I could find those beautiful words again because I was operating from here, not here. And I think when we start to operate from our knowing rather than our thinking, we're actually unstoppable. We really are unstoppable. When things, we go out there and we train people in thinking, they can achieve. When we train people how to connect to their senses and to operate from that place of knowing, that place of, wow, that sounded really smart. I don't know where that came from. Or how did I know that? But I just do. And as parents, we experience that every day. We've not raised children before. How did we know this was the right thing? How did we know that that was the way, or how that would impact our child? We know that stuff, and we didn't have to go and get a degree to figure out how to raise our children. We operate a lot on knowing. And I know as a healer that when parents come to me with their children and their child has some sort of physical illness or some emotional issues or other things, just empowering parents by saying to them, if you could guess what the problem is, just a wild guess, what do you think it would be? 9 times out of 10, they're on the money. And if I trust them, even though it doesn't make sense in the first instance, with everything that I've been trained in the health science world, plus everything that I've been trained in my traditional world, I look at it and go, how do they connect? But let's just go with that for a moment. Let's just go with that and see where it takes us. 9 times out of 10, the parent is right. But we need permission today. We think someone has to give us permission to guess.
Yes, that's so. And I think you round on something that I think is at the core of our question and our thoughts about the kind of change that we're wanting to see. Because sometimes the focus on the change can be around deciding what is right, like getting the question right, getting the answer, getting to the answer, getting to the finish line. And what we're really interested in is the ability to guess and follow the guess. I'm thinking about your example of you're in a meeting and you're thinking about strategy and you break it down. I think a lot about some of the big challenges that we want to deal with: climate change, poverty, social unrest, those things. And a lot of times in response, what people say is, it's too complicated. It's too complex for us to figure it out. It's you have to really understand how these things work. International politics are all challenging. And that's not wrong. It's not untrue. It's just that's more evidence of the challenge that we're in, because we should be able to break those things down to simple things of how do we feed people? How do we ensure people's well-being? Is the problem getting people educated? Okay, well, let's, when you break some of these things down simply, it becomes easy to address. But I also think that in doing that, because of the way that we're existing in society together now, we feel that there are right answers, even if they're not leading to health, even if they're not leading to well-being, even if they're disconnecting us from the land, and guessing for a new answer that may be unfamiliar to us, or maybe uncomfortable, or maybe challenge our ideas about who's the authority and who's not, feels inaccessible. And we have to generate, to your point, a sense of permission for people to even engage in the discussion of potential, which is where you started. Like, what is our human potential to care for each other, not just achieve technological advancements or amass resources? what is our potential as a planet in terms of harmony, in terms of support, care, the experience of being. And I think that your insights lead us directly down that path. And so I want to, as I'm respecting your time and we're wrapping up, and I could like, talk to you forever, but I'm curious to know, like, just in thinking about that, and as we're kind of wrapping, you've already spoken to kind of how people carry this, what people, even given some demonstrations of what people can practice. Is there something specific that maybe we haven't brought up or it hasn't come up in the discussion so far that you may want to highlight, or a vision of what this could all look like for people to kind of sit with and reflect on, as we go on?
I think just for the points that you're making there, Eddie, is I use the word guess because it's a language we understand.
Yes.
I could easily use the word know. We know. And I know when I get personally challenged and when there are things that are emotional, generally around our children, our family, the people we care for, fear, all of those things. And I get to this point where, if I do this, then that, there's the outcome. No, I don't like that outcome. If I do this, then this is, oh no, I don't like that outcome either. And I can go all day and go in circles, and you get that sense of hopelessness, that sense of frustration. I've learned in my life to just let go of all of that and say, what is the right thing? Never mind the whys, the wheres, the what fors. What is the right thing to do here and now? No attachment to the outcome. I know the right thing is to go and visit that ailing relative that, before they pass. I know that's the right thing to do. I don't want to think about all the past arguments in the family. I don't want to think about how upset and how undignified I might be when I get there. I don't want to think about what other people might think about me going or not going. I just know, not think, I just know the right thing to do is to go. And when I get there, life takes care of itself. So this ability to know and to just do the right thing in the moment, nothing more, no attachment to outcome, just do the right thing. And I think this brings us right back to one of the fundamental mistakes that humans have made. We have created an artificial law. We've created laws that say how we must conduct ourselves. There is only one law, L-O-R-E, the law of nature. And no decrees, no rules that we make will ever trump the law of nature. Nature is the boss. The law of nature is what maintains balance. It is what gives life. It is what ensures the circle of life moves smoothly. So when we come back to knowing, we are connecting to our ability to remember and to be part of nature. So always coming back to L-O-R-E rather than L-A-W, which is a pseudo-human way of redefining the law of nature as we understand it. And we've got no idea. We have no idea. Just stick with the law of nature. Because no matter how much we write and vote and appoint people and make laws, it will never, ever usurp the law of nature. And so when we act in the right way, and if we're wrong, our thinking could have been flawed too. But there is this thing of knowing that sets us right. The right thing to do right now is this. And I don't need to know why. I'm not attached to the outcome because it's all too hard for me to think about, because then I go off on all these tangents. This tiny little problems become this huge big problem that I can't even begin to see where it started. But when I pull all of that back and go, what is the right thing to do right now? And I can hear my grandparents, my great-great-grandparents going, you know the answer. You know what you need to do. What are you mucking around for? And I think if we can operate that on a personal level, then that branches out. You know, it's like ripples in a pond that branches out to the world and the impact we have on the world. And we work in flow with each other, with our brothers and sisters in the natural world, with the universe. And we will start to relearn the things that sit inside us, that sit in our bones. And I often say when we're training and things like that, that in order for training to be relevant, professionally, however, it must first be personally relevant. If it doesn't touch this, if it doesn't awaken something deep within, if you're me, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. Whereas if what I'm learning is personally relevant as to how I might solve a problem, how I might connect with the rest of the world, how I might help others, unless that's personally relevant for me, I don't waste my time anymore. And that's not being selfish, that's understanding how things fit together and trusting. And I think when we can do that, things like all the unrest that we see in the world at the moment, actually, it instills hope in us. The right thing for me to do right now about these things, for me, and it'll be different for all of us, is to be a better example, of how I work with and see and deal with my differences with others. And that's what I can do right now. And tomorrow it'll be something else, and tomorrow it'll be the day after, it'll be something else. But if we just do what is right in the here and the now, without judgment, without attachment, then I think we're on a much better road. And as a species, we will move together in a way that is so different to the way it has in the recent past. And if we look at things traditionally, we don't measure things in hours, days, or years. Traditionally, we all measured things in generations. And let our generation be the turning point for how we as humans understand our place in this world, how we contribute, how we matter. Then I think we're going to have a much better world to live in. And it starts with what is the right thing. And I don't need to think about it, because we all know the right thing in any given instance. We might not like it, but we know the right thing. And if we can just start there, things will be a lot better for us first.